Well, we really are very pleased with this partnership and also with the trust that Ameriabank places in FMO.
So, Mr. de Ruijter, welcome.
Thank you.
You are the Chief Investment Officer at FMO. Could you elaborate for our viewers what FMO does?
Yes. FMO is the development bank of the Netherlands. We empower entrepreneurs to build a better world, and we do so by providing finance, knowledge and network to local private sector companies, in particularly the financial sector, the energy sector and the agribusiness sector.
Wow. So you're one of the biggest development banks in Europe, I guess?
Correct. Yeah.
So have you, what kind of trends have you witnessed in the global economy, but in the banking sector as well?
Well, last year was obviously heavily impacted by the COVID pandemic. We've seen many countries being affected, both from a health perspective as well as from an economics perspective. I think the IMF indicated that there was a reduction in GDP of around 2.5% last year. I think that is expected to recover this year. There's still lots of uncertainty there. And looking at it from our perspective, what we see is that this has caused a serious setback in terms of inequality and poverty, with people falling back into poverty and progress that has been made over the last decades being undone, actually.
Yeah. Is there a difference between, let's say, emerging markets and developed countries in their response or in their economic hardship?
Well, particularly in the economic hardship, I think from a sort of a disease perspective, I think many of the markets have not been so heavily affected for several reasons. One may be that it's often relatively young populations. But from an economic perspective, a lot of these countries have been very hard hit from several angles. So one is that governments typically don't have the means to provide the same support programs as we've seen here in Europe, for instance. The other is that investors have withdrawn capital from those markets. So we've seen very large capital outflows, which also affect local economies, and in that sense also make the role of development banks so important, because they are there to provide long-term stable capital.
Well, that's interesting, because you obviously are very committed to building long-term relationships and also in times of economic hardship. So how did the relationships with your partners develop during COVID-19?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And what we said at the start of the COVID crisis was we should really focus on our existing long-term relationships and providing support for those clients. At the time, there was a large amount of uncertainty in terms of how things would develop. And we really wanted to stand by our existing customers. And we've done so in several ways. So what you see in quite a few of the local economies is that banks or other financiers provide payment holidays to their clients to help them weather the storm. So we've said, well, we would be happy to mirror that and also provide payment holidays to our clients to allow them to do so. In some cases, clients asked for emergency funding or emergency capital. So we provided that funding or capital to those clients. We've also continued with our regular financing because climate change or inequality stays very important to solve also in these circumstances. And next to that, we've also tried to provide them help with knowledge, organizing webinars. How do you manage a crisis? How do you accelerate digital transformation, for instance?
So you're really trying to make a difference in this COVID crisis. Does that really work in your perspective?
Well, what we've seen so far is that our clients hold up very well, actually. So by that sense, it does work with the support, I think, from ourselves, but also from other partners from the development finance community. They've been able to weather the storm rather well. So I think that is a good thing. And at the same time, what you see is that this is a catalyst for change as well. So I was just referring to digital transformation. If you're all in lockdown, you need to find digital ways to interact, just like we do our shopping online these days. And you see that trend has accelerated, and I think that will continue to be beneficial also after the pandemic.
Yeah. So let's talk about Armenian banks, because the FMO has a long-standing relationship incorporating with the Armenian banks. What is your assessment of the Armenian banking industry?
Well, we've been active since 2009 in the Armenian banking industry, and we view it as a rather professional banking sector. So for us, actually, it's one of the countries where we have quite a significant amount of investments.
Mm-hmm.
I think over the last 4 years, we did around 11 projects with Armenian banks.
Okay.
We feel on the one hand the professionalism of the sector is really helpful. On the other hand, we see that they are very open to also pursue the development impact agenda jointly. So where in the past we used to provide financing and then left it to the banks to on-lend it basically to small or medium-sized entrepreneurs, we now try to target it a little bit more to, for instance, address climate change specifically, or to provide access to groups which have less access. So you can think of female entrepreneurs or young entrepreneurs. And we see that the banks are very keen to pick up on these agendas and to collaborate on serving also those underserved segments of the market.
Mm-hmm.
For us, we really need to work in partnership with those local banks, and it works well in Armenia.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting that you say we have significant investments in Armenia. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Why you're so interested in this country?
Yeah, so strategically from FMO's perspective, we operate across the world, but we do have a special focus on Africa, as well as the sort of the European neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And Armenia, obviously being one of the important countries in the European neighborhood, is a country where we find the right partners to pursue our development agenda. So it fits very well from a strategic perspective.
Right. So it has been 10 years since the FMO and Ameriabank started cooperating. How effective is this partnership?
Well, we really are very pleased with this partnership and also with the trust that Ameriabank places in FMO. We've partnered in a number of areas, really in terms of innovation. So I think we started out also with helping develop their environmental and social management system to manage any risks in that context. But over time, that partnership has evolved, and we've really done firsts in the context of Armenia. So we've provided the first financing and worked together on that in terms of young entrepreneurs. We provided the first FMO loan in local currency to Ameriabank, and now we've worked with them on the first green bond in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And we can do that together with Ameriabank because they are so professional on the one hand, and on the other hand, they're very open to pursue that impact agenda together with us.
Yeah. Could you elaborate a little bit on that professionalism? What is that from your perspective then?
Well, for us, it means that we work with people who really understand what they're doing, who have a strategic agenda in terms of going about that, and who really live up to their commitments as well.
Yeah.
At the same time, what I always hear back from the team is that it's also nice and fun to work with the Ameria people,
very
which
important
also
as well.
is very important.
Yeah. So because I guess you as a FMO think that transparency and reliability are very important. So how do you look at the corporate governance framework at Ameriabank?
Yeah. So for us, that is really important indeed. And what we see is that Ameria has really become a very professional bank. Its operations are best in class. Mm-hmm. And for a bank, that is critically important. In terms of the board structure and the shareholder structure, we've also seen that they've really made steps over the last few years with diversifying their shareholder base, getting very reputable shareholders in, but also in terms of the board members, we've seen that they've brought on board a much more diversified group of board members, bringing in international expertise as well, which is also something which we like.
Yeah.
In terms of what we would like to see more, well, for instance, gender diversity on the board is something where I think we would be happy to see a next step from Ameriabank.
Right. So, as you probably know, they're preparing an IPO. Any thoughts on this endeavor?
Well, that's something which we very much encourage from an FMO perspective.
Why?
Well, for two reasons. One is the journey towards that listing. That really means that you have to further professionalize your organization, to further upgrade your corporate governance, really to best-in-class standards, particularly when you look also at the London Stock Exchange. So in terms of the institution itself, we feel this is really a worthwhile trajectory. If you look at then the point in time that you really get listed, you really expand your investor base, your brand recognition, and that's also something which is very important to us. We feel that it is our role to ultimately mobilize commercial investors. We can do the sort of the groundwork, but ultimately our capital is limited, and private investors need to step in and to play that role for the long run. And we feel a listing can really be beneficial in that. And we also feel it very much fits with Ameriabank. I mean, being the first in terms of green bonds, being the first in terms of listing on the London Stock Exchange would be a fantastic next step, and we would be proud to partner in that.
Yeah, I hear a proud investor talking. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So any closing remarks on Ameriabank and the cooperation with them?
Well, we thank them very much for the trust over the last decade, or a bit more than a decade, and we're very excited about the journey ahead. And I would say keep up the good work. Thank you.
Mr. de Ruijter, thank you very much.
Thank you.